Time now to put our eye on the Clemson Tigers, who find themselves as a trendy pick to make this season's college football playoff. Tigers are coming off their first ACC championship victory since 2022, their first CFP appearance since 2020. Dabo Swinney's program tied for the 7th shortest odds to win the national championship at 14-1. All right, let's bring in Austin Hannon from 24/7 Sports and Chip Patterson from the Cover 3 podcast to go a little bit deeper into this Tigers program. Austin, I'm going to start with you. What's the word and the lowdown on Cade Klubnik? What are the chances he's got the most around him that he's ever had since he's been on campus?
Yeah, I think there's 12 more regular season games that are confirmed in the books for Cade Klubnik before he starts looking toward his NFL future. Obviously, he'd like it to be more than 12. Last year, they played 14 games. They obviously got back to Charlotte, played in the ACC title. He was named the game's MVP for the second time in his career. And now, looking forward to this season, it's where can that next step come from? Obviously, they lost in the first round at Texas last December. But I think a lot of people were kind of surprised by the fight we saw from the Tigers in the second half and really specifically from Klubnik and really putting together one of the best passing performances against that Texas secondary last season, which I believe was the #1 unit in pass defense in the entire country. So I think just continuing to build off last season and not taking that step back to what we kind of saw earlier in his career in terms of turning the football over and stuff like that. If he can continue what we saw last year, he's got so much around him this year. The receivers are incredible. There's a little bit of a question at the running back position, but 4 returners on the offensive line, 4 returners, starters at receiver, including a guy that they didn't even have last year in Tyler Brown. So the riches are pretty much endless for Cade Klubnik. It's just about putting it all together.
Yeah, continuity and cohesiveness. Those are the 2 C words I think about for Clemson, particularly when it comes to the passing game. To have now all of these years and that they can stack on top of each other with Garrett Riley as the offensive coordinator, to be able to have now a wide receiver room where wide receiver is not a question. Wide receiver is a strength. The best wide receiver room in the ACC and one of the best in the entire country. You had your freshman flash last year, your Bryant Wesco, your TJ Moore, but Antonio Williams was the guy that was first team all conference last year, and he gets to be the vet. We get the mention, of course, right there of Tyler Brown, who was very good as a young player and only continues to add depth here. I just think that you've got a Clemson team, a Clemson offense, a Clemson passing attack that is one of the most experienced in the entire country. And now when you've got that difference maker at quarterback, I'm really excited because Cade Klubnik could be the X factor in national championship contention, because among the top teams, let's say the top 7 or 8 teams in terms of the national title odds, most of them have new starters at quarterback, but not the Clemson Tigers, and that could be a real strength come playoff time.
On the other side of the ball, guys, Clemson was 50th in the country in scoring defense, 69th in total defense there, Austin. So what have been the early returns for Tom Allen and the expectation for this group?
I'm expecting really a turnaround in a big way. Obviously, 3rd year under Wes Goodwin last year as defensive coordinator. It was more of a trial thing with Dabo Swinney. He had been a longtime staffer under Brent Venables during all those successful years. They kind of threw him into the defensive coordinator position. First couple years, not so bad. Last year, obviously, was a big problem and was really what kept Clemson out of, I would say, national title conversations was the defense last year, especially up front, which is where we just haven't seen that in years past. I think they were near 80th or 90th in rush defense. They were in the 50s or 60s against the pass. Neither of those numbers we got accustomed to under Venables when they were winning those championships. So year 1 under Tom Allen, he's got a lot of expectations. Obviously, the paycheck speaks for that. He came down from State College at Penn State after 1 year with James Franklin. And a lot of people were surprised about that move, but he's got a lot of family in the Carolinas, and I think he really, really wanted that opportunity to work under Dabo Swinney, a guy that he's respected for a lot of years. And so getting to see him coach under Dabo Swinney and walk around with a microphone and kind of act like a head coach almost at some of these Clemson practices tells me all I need to know about kind of the buy-in from this defense coming into this season. They're really good up front. They've got Peter Woods. They've got TJ Parker. They brought in a guy in Will Helt that we'll talk about in a minute from the transfer portal. DeMonte Capart's coming back at defensive tackle to use his extra year. And then they got guys at linebacker, Wade Woodaz, Sammy Brown. I think that they're very comfortable in. They brought in Jeremiah Alexander, another linebacker from Alabama. I think the question just really remains on the back end for this defense.
Yeah, so what would that be? You would anticipate for Tom Allen, a lot of his focus will be on that 3rd level in the secondary, Austin?
I do think so. I think that's where the lack of experience is to this point, other than Avion Terrell, which is their #1 guy heading into the season. The number 2 guy is going to be Ashton Hampton, who was just a true freshman last year at corner. But they really do like those top 2 guys at corner. The issue behind them is there's been some injuries. And then there's just been a little bit of lack of experience from some of the younger guys in the corner room. And at safety, they really like Khalil Barnes. He's a guy that's lined up in the nickel in the slot in years past. He's really done a good job at that. They moved him back to deep safety last year, and it was a little bit of a learning process, a little bit of a learning curve, I think, for him. But I think he's gotten more comfortable in that position, and then it's just really about figuring out that strong safety spot. They've got Kylan Griffin, a guy that's been around in the program. They've got a younger guy in Ricardo Jones. And I think a little bit of an outside-the-box look here is a guy that was used to play receiver for Clemson. His name's Ronan Hannafin, former hockey player in Massachusetts, is now lined up at safety on the practice field. So maybe he figures a way to get in there in the starting role. We'll see. But there is a couple holes on the back end and what's a really good Clemson defense, I think, heading into 2025.
Chip, I think a lot of people assume that Clemson under Dabo, the portal ain't a thing, signing guys not a thing. Although I think in February he said the crazy thing is we signed a guy 3 out of the last 4 years. Things are a little bit different this year. What's your eye on this Clemson team when it comes to this specific part of the game?
All right, Tommy, first of all, I'm going to hold Dabo's feet to the fire because they got some glorified grad assistants through the transfer portal. We're talking third-string quarterbacks and things of that nature. No, what Dabo has always said is that, he's not going to run players off his roster. And a lot of the transfer portal era has been players getting run off their roster, told that they should leave, told that they should enter the transfer portal, and they have not had scholarships available. What I love about the transfers that he's taking here is that he's taking players that are going to play. He's not just utilizing the portal to be able to just fill a numbers game. They had some scholarships available and they addressed needs. Will Helt is a high-level edge rusher who's going to be a key part of being on the other side of TJ Parker. Tristan Smith adds real depth to the wide receiver room, so if they have injuries at that position again, he can be ready to go. And Jeremiah Alexander might be one of the best versions of the transfer portal, which is the change of scenery transfer. There's so many players at the power conference level, blue chips coming out of high school, but it's just not the right fit. Can Alexander find that in a new environment? I will say that given all the upheaval there has been at the Alabama football program in the last 2 years or so, the consistency that he's going to get at Clemson, I think, will be very refreshing. So Dabo Swinney's always said, we don't have the scholarships. When he had scholarships available, he added players. And what I love is they're not grad transfers. They are actually players that are going to be on the field making a difference.
And he's been saying recently, temper some of those expectations for us being an elite title contending team. But we're not asking Dabo. We're asking you, Chip Patterson. You've combed through the schedule. Lay it down for me. And do they go back-to-back with those CFP bracket appearances?
And look, Tommy, I feel like I'm given a worst-case scenario. I really do. I've got the Tigers at 10-2. I've got them taking care of business against LSU in that opener. I think home field's just going to be so massive. And then I've got them just running off wins against a very manageable first half of the schedule. And then you get SMU at home. But this is where it gets interesting. So I'm going to hand them the loss because I think that Jeff Brom in Louisville might just have Clemson's number. We saw the Cards go into Death Valley last year and hand Clemson one of the more stunning home losses, had the fans hitting the exits before the fourth quarter. And then in a similar vein here, I've got South Carolina getting a win in the regular season finale, but that's still 7-1 in conference play. They're still my pick to win the ACC. They're still my pick to make the college football playoff. And yes, if they can stay healthy, they will enter the college football playoff as one of those teams out of the 12 that I think has the goods to be able to go and win it all. So back to the CFP, I say yes, but not with an unblemished record. There might be a few traps along the way.
Great stuff, fellas. You can check out Austin's stuff on 24/7 Sports and, of course, Chip Patterson of the Cover 3 podcast with Tom Fornelli, with Danny Cadell, with Bud Elliott. The guys just getting into that midseason form. Scan the QR code. Check them out however you listen to your podcast and on YouTube as well.